Nintendo are suing Palworld.
Why?
Something that we thought might happen earlier in the year because Palworld was released back in January and quickly became known as Pokemon with Guns. Now, across 2024, developers Pocket Pair, that's the developers of Palworld, said that they didn't hear anything from Nintendo, and they stated that the game had passed legal review before launch, which is a great thing to say before your game's coming out. Hey, by the way, it's passed legal review. I'm sure it's fine. However, back at the beginning of the year, the Pokemon Company, which is literally the name of the developers of Pokemon, said they were launching an official investigation into the game, into Palworld, and now, 9 months later, Nintendo is suing for, and I quote, an injunction against infringement and compensation for damages on the grounds that Palworld, a game developed and released by the defendant, infringes multiple patent rights. And Nintendo will continue to take necessary actions against any infringement of its intellectual property rights, including the Nintendo brand itself, to protect the intellectual properties it has worked hard to establish over the years. Now, the thing is, a lot of people are saying, why did it possibly take them that long? Back when Palworld first came out, there was a couple of videos that did the round showing specific character comparisons between the specific Pokemon and specific pals, as they're called in Palworld, and saying, look, these renders, these nav meshes, these specific wireframe models that make up the creatures are too similar, and that's something that would be immediately obvious as an infringement on copyright. However, I forget the name of the individual who put that video out, did say that they faked it. So since then, it's been a conversation on can you release a game that is so similar to Pokemon, that has something similar, like the catch mechanic, has the almost 1, 2, 3 approach to does the creature stay in the ball kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can you copyright that? It is a much wider conversation. That, there are examples of creative game mechanics being copyrighted. Like Namco owned the patent for having a mini game during a loading screen for I think like 3 decades. That was why you could play Gallagher inside Ridge Racer. But that was it. Like that patent ran out a good 5-6 years ago. But no developers have put additional games in their loading screens since. And also Warner Brothers tried to, I think, successfully patented the Nemesis system.
They did, yeah.
For the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games. So it's a weird slippery slope with this stuff, but thoughts on the whole thing?
It's interesting because I didn't play Palworld at launch.
You missed out.
You did.
So good.
Apparently, I missed out. Everyone else in the world was playing it.
It was
I
a
don't
good
know
week.
why I didn't jump into it. Maybe
It was a
because
great week.
I don't love Pokemon. Sorry. Hey.
This one's got guns.
But my question is, what exactly is the lawsuit based on? And is it, in your opinion, Scott, as someone who plays a lot of Pokemon and played a lot of Palworld, is it a Mickey Mouse claim or is there something there? Because to me, if it's patented game play elements or mechanics, I don't like that personally, because the two you mentioned there, the ability to play a game during a loading screen, but more pressingly, the Nemesis system. I always think that developers iterating on mechanics that already exist, it's what leads to those mechanics becoming better, but also it can result in entire subgenres or genres entirely being born. Like everyone who ripped off Doom, everyone who went on to rip off Halo or ripped off Resi 4's control scheme with over-the-shoulder aiming or whatever it was. Recently with Souls-like games, if From Software was able to patent like the core mechanics of Elden Ring, or not Elden Ring, obviously Demon Souls and Dark Souls, we wouldn't have had stuff like Lies of P, an amazing game that can only exist because those previous games essentially established the blueprint. However, I do think it's an entirely different beast when we're talking about specific characters, specific imagery, specific names, like literally just trading on that, of course, is outright copyright infringement. And that's something that I don't view as the same thing as taking an interesting mechanic and putting your own spin on it.
It's kind of fascinating because it is interesting that two of the quotes that have been pulled, the second of the two, saying that Nintendo will continue to take necessary actions against any infringement of its intellectual property rights. There are other Pokemon games out there.
Okay.
There should be a Pokemon genre, ostensibly, and we don't really call it anything. We kind of sometimes call it the monster catching genre. We sometimes refer to monster catching mechanics. Temtem was a game that came out a good few years ago that initially had a big surge of popularity and it kind of just died off. There was an early access period and then it blew up a little bit. Then it was just kind of out. I thought it was too expensive for what it was. It didn't catch on, is my point. Also, just last year, there was Cassette Beast, which is another kind of turn-based Pokemon game that isn't Pokemon enough for Nintendo to care. Palworld made such a dent at the start of this year and felt like, all the opinion pieces at the time were like, this is a proper rival to Pokemon.
Right.
In terms of the sheer size of it, the player numbers, how much people were talking about it, how much, because I love my time with Palworld. They bring in so many like survival aspects and so much base building and all these different, like you can argue ancillary components, parts of the overall experience that are fundamental to Palworld, but would be ancillary to the monster catching stuff. that it still meant that Palworld felt distinct from Pokemon.
Yes.
But the conversation became, oh, Nintendo could learn something from this. And it's interesting because Nintendo have been getting away with video game murder for quite some time in regards to, especially Pokemon. Pokemon Violet and Sapphire were abysmal releases. Like, I had a good chunk of fun with them, but the frame rate being sub 30, the level of detail, like it barely loading anything that was beyond like a handful of feet. Like, really, really bad launches. And they've had them for a while. I love Pokemon Arceus, but even that was hobbled by frame rate issues and texture issues and things like that. They could do a lot better. Like, you look at the likes of Zelda and Mario versus Pokemon. Pokemon is up there with the sales figures, but it doesn't have the detail.
Yeah.
And so I think Palworld was a bit of a shock to them in terms of like, this is what you could be doing. And even Palworld wasn't that polished, but it still looked better than Pokemon, most recent Pokemon. To bring it all back around, is this just Nintendo going like, we're the only guys in this game and you need to respect that we own whatever they're saying are the Pokemon mechanics. Because they can only say that to a point before you start infringing on, like I said, Temtem, Cassette Beasts. Some of the Dragon Quest games have, Pokemon mechanics in. Like, is this just them saying we own this and we have enough weight to throw around that we can try and lock this down like a Warner Brothers, like a Namco? Or is it, you have to kind of give that ground up. But the fact that they're going there means this is going to be a really weird conversation for a good few months while they try and establish what the hell Pokemon mechanics even are.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see like what exactly they're going to use as examples here, because I do think lawsuits like this could definitely become more common, especially in the era we're about to enter, which definitely seems, at least in the short term, is going to be the era of generative AI. And I know a lot of the bigger studios like EA or Bungie or Blizzard or whatever, not Bungie, sorry, Blizzard, have been making their own internal models that doesn't pull from outside art that already exists, so in that way won't infringe any copyright or won't induce any accusations of plagiarism, because theoretically it's all stuff that that company owns and it's just kind of pulling from themselves. But not those regulations are not going to be in place immediately. We are going to see, maybe a lot of AI stuff that is pulling from sources that are out there. I mean, even before we had AI, we had sort of like asset flips, where you were just getting assets from one game being used in another one without permission or anything. I'm not saying this is that, but there is a lot.
It's not that far off.
No, there's a lot of stuff like that in the video game world that I do think deserves scrutiny, does deserve consequences if it happens. But I do also think that general idea of mechanics and gameplay ideas, I don't know who benefits from stamping down on that, unless it is a literal, we are, using this YMA, we are using the code from this game and using it in ours. That, again, is a different thing. It's such a nuanced topic, I think, but it's interesting, like you said, to see how this is going to shake out over the next few months. And if the Palworld devs respond and kind of have their own evidence to say, like, look, no, we've got something to brush up against this.
That's the thing, because I forget the name of the guy that runs the Pocket Pair, the studio, but he's out there saying he's a huge Pokemon fan. Like at all the conversation in January at the start of the year about how similar the games were, he was like, well, yeah, like I love Pokemon, like I've grown up playing them, but this is my own thing. It's just a strange thing, because to try and start drawing boxes around this stuff, like if you're Nintendo, I think they've taken so long because they've had to assemble a certain amount of ammo to then try and unleash on this, because it is such a thorny topic to nail down. But there are specific creature comparisons. Like even when that video was proven as fake, you still have specific comparisons between like certain sheep creatures that look really similar. Like the Pokemon Wooloo looks really similar to one of the pals that you get at the very beginning of the game. Like, Palworld is definitely trading on Pokemon in a way that is more aggressive than, Temtem or whatever. And I guess that's what they're going to try and hinge it on. And things like certain creature faces look extremely similar. Like if you just take Pikachu's eyes and mouth, they look really similar to certain Pal's eyes and mouth. And it's like, I wonder if it's going to get as granular as that. But yeah, Nintendo are weird with lawsuits. Like they sometimes don't care about stuff for years. They let fan projects go on and on and on. Yeah. And then they clamp down on them later on. But when Nintendo get legal, I don't think they've ever lost. And so it's like Nintendo tend to get legal when they know they have something to do, and they can suck, like overall. As much as I love Nintendo, they can absolutely suck in that regard. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting. They clamped down on a lot of fan projects. There was the Pokemon Nuclear Project from like 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm forgetting its full name. I'm forgetting a lot, but it was a full thing that was going to be a full Pokemon game. They let that go all the way until it was about to launch, and then they said, "Nah, that's too close to something it's ours, so we're cutting this out." Would have been a good sort of maybe even 10 years ago, but still, they can come in and clamp things down. But I think they have something here. I don't necessarily agree with it. Like I want what you want. I want a free industry, a free medium to do whatever they want. But there's a reason we all started referring to this as Pokemon with guns. Like it literally is that.
I have a lot of criticisms when it comes to Nintendo's business practices, and I do think they get away with a lot because their games are so charming and of such a high quality. But a lot of the stuff they do business-wise, I don't love, whether that's the artificial scarcity, whether that's the overcharging, I would say, for certain products or what have you, or exactly what you said, taking down other competitors or even fan-made stuff just at the last minute without any warning, really. I do agree with
Pokemon
all
Uranium.
of those criticisms. There it is.
Was
But that said, like you mentioned, they have been sitting on this for a while. I imagine they have been doing their research. I imagine they do have a case. They could have knee-jerked reaction this lawsuit as soon as Palworld was out and was at its biggest and was getting all of those millions of players and was being crowned the Pokemon killer. They could have done it then. It didn't. It waited. It's no doubt been amassing a case, and I am fascinated to see what that case is because, like you said, it is interesting when a game becomes so big but trades off someone else's name. Like, I imagine there are a lot of people who knew about the Pokemon with Guns game before they knew that game's title.
Oh, yeah, massively. I was just quickly checking the Steam numbers there. Like, at its peak, it was on 2.1 million players over on Steam. It's now down to a 24-hour period of about 24,000. However, one of the wrinkles to this is that Xbox got involved in its development on the Xbox Series systems because it is available only on Xbox because it's still in early access. It's in the Xbox Early Access program. It's the only way you could play it on consoles, which was cool at the time that they got in on that and let people play it. That's how I played it. But I wonder how far this goes because there was a whole thing a good few months ago about how Xbox were helping development, helping to get it over the finish line. Palworld just had a really big update with additional quest lines and things that like fleshed the game out. I mean, it's felt like it's been in early access. Even the version that blew up so much had a lot left to do on it, but it might kind of become like a weird platform back and forth in terms of how wide the lawsuit goes, where it's like who was actually involved in this. Like once more, I don't know, reputable individuals or whatever get involved in it, do they start going, this looks weirdly similar to this other thing, or we kind of can't be seen working on this? I'm just speculating, but it's such a potentially thorny issue that it could go really wide. And then you have Palworld's association with Xbox being part of the conversation as well.
Well, correct me if I am wrong, but was there not a leak really recently that suggested it was finally coming to PlayStation and other consoles as well? I feel like I saw that. I don't think it was officially announced, but the idea is that, eventually it will leave that Xbox sort of early access or, kind of not exclusivity, but association with Xbox and come to other platforms and other consoles. So I wonder whether this is a case of Nintendo getting in now to preempt that, or I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, maybe.
I can't. When was the last time Nintendo did something like this, like a lawsuit of this scale? I can't remember.
Well, that's the thing. They've not had anything blow up this much to contend with them so much. Like at the beginning, there was a few, like I said, various headlines, various conversations back when Palworld was blowing up, saying like this is the future of this genre because you had all the survival mechanics and you had such a Breath of the Wild style exploration element to it, which in itself, was in Pokemon Arceus, Pokemon Sapphire Violet, but it's like when you roll it all together, the monster catching is just one part of Palworld. Like you are doing third-person shooting, you are doing base defense, you're like building the base out, you're doing all these things that you never do in Pokemon. So they haven't really had a rival this big. And like I said, they're more known for shutting down emulators or emulation websites that have archives of their old titles because they want to sell them on the virtual console instead, or on the eShop or whatever, or shutting down fan projects. I don't think a game ever got this big that was like officially released where they've had to step in and go, that's too close.
The thing with Palworld though, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. Again, you played it way more than I did. I just watched footage of it at the time and was kind of keeping up with the conversations. But every mechanic in there looked like it was an amalgamation of something else that was popular. Like you mentioned the survival mechanics, and to me they look like the survival mechanics I've seen in so many of the survival games. So at what point does it become more than just a Pokemon thing and kind of, I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm just speculating like you are. But because it's not just, like you said, it's not just one-to-one Pokemon, maybe it seems like that within certain mechanics, but it's pulling from so many other inspirations. And definitely Pokemon is the main one, but it's not the only one.
It never heard Ubisoft before. And in regards to pulling from different things. However, I do think Palworld does have enough of an identity. Like, it is blurring together the monster catching stuff, the shooting, like I said, the base building. But they do a really, really cool, really fun intersection of, like, every creature that you catch has different specialities. They can help you in the base in different ways. Water Pokemon might help you water the flowers or the crops or whatever. Fire Pokemon might help you do, like, a fire spell might help you defend or whatever. Certain Pokemon you can wield like a weapon and then use that in combat. Like, things that Pokemon itself has never done, and little things like that, like combining the monster catching stuff with third-person shooting, third-person action, is very rarely done. Like, at least like this anyway. So I think they can step back and be like, look, we had some cool ideas. It's just really hard to get away from, now that it's got legal, to get away from the Pokemon influence on it. Yeah. When the creator themselves is saying they're a huge fan, and a lot of the marketing, albeit not officially, it was more just the conversation, was Pokemon with guns. But we'll see. It's a fascinating thing.